Good evening, students. Today we'll start a new chapter called cell structure and function. Already learned that things around us are either living or non-living. Further, you may recall that all living organisms carry out certain basic function. Can you list this function? Different set of organs perform various functions you have listed. In this chapter, you also will learn about basic structural unit of an organ. The cells may be compared to bricks. Bricks are assembled to make a building. Cells are assembled to make body of every organism. First we know about history of cell and how the cell was discovered. Robert Hooke in 1665 observed the slice of cork under a simple magnifying device. Cork is a part of the bark of a tree. He took thin slice of cork of a tree and observed them under microscope. He noticed partitioned boxes or compartments in the cork slice. These boxes appeared like a honeycomb. You also notice that one of the box was separated from the other by a wall or partition. Hooke coined the term cell for each box. What Hooke observed as boxes or cells in the cork were actually dead cells. The cells of the living organism could be observed only after the discovery of improved microscopes. Very little was known about the cell for the next 150 years after Robert Hooke's observation. Today we know that a lot about cell structure and its function because all improved microscope having high magnification. Both bricks in a building and cells in the living organisms are basic structural units. The buildings, though built of similar bricks, have different design, shapes and sizes. Similarly, in the living world, organisms differ from one another but all are made up of cells. Cells in the living organisms are complex living structures, unlike non-living bricks. The egg of a hen represents single cell and is big enough to be seen by the unaided eye. Organisms show variety in cell number, shape and size. How do scientists study the living cells? They use microscopes which magnify objects. Stains are used to color the parts of the cell to study detailed structure. There are millions of living organisms. They are of different shapes, sizes and organs. Their organs also vary in shape, size and number of cells. Let us study some of them. Can you guess the number of cells in a tall tree or in a huge animal like an elephant? The number runs up to millions and trillions and billions. Human body has trillions of cells which vary in shape and sizes. Different groups of cells perform variety of functions. Organisms made up of more than one cell are called multicellular. The number of cells being less in number, each organism does not in any way affect the functioning of the organisms. You will be surprised to know that an organism with billions of cells begins a life as a single cell, which is fertilized egg. The fertilized egg multiplies and the number of cells increase as development proceeds. Organisms made up of single cell. The single celled organisms are called unicellular organisms. The single celled organism performs all the necessary functions that a multicellular organism performs. A single celled organisms like amoeba captures, digests food, respires, excretes, grows and reproduces. Similar functions in multicellular organisms are carried out by groups, specialized cells forming different tissues in turn from organs. How do you define the shape of amoeba in the figure? You may say that the shape appears irregular. In fact, amoeba has no definite shape unlike other organisms. It keeps on changing its shape. Observe the projections of varying length. It's protruding out of its body. These are called pseudopodia, as you have learned in class 7. These projections appear and disappear on amoeba moves or feeds. A white blood cell in human blood is another example of single cell which can change its shape, but while WBC is a cell, amoeba is a full-fledged organism capable of independent existence. What shape would you expect in organisms with millions of cells? They show different cells such as blood, muscle, nerve of human beings. Different shapes are related to different specific functions. Generally, cells are round, spherical, elongated. Some cells are long and pointed at both ends. They exhibit a spindle shape. Cells sometimes are quite long, some are branched like the nerve cell or neuron. The nerve cell receives and transfers the message, thereby helping to control and coordinate the working of different parts of the body. Can you guess which part of the cell gives its shape? The components of cell are enclosed in a membrane. This membrane provides shape to the plants and animals. Cell wall is an additional covering over the cell membrane. It gives shape and rigidity to the cell. Bacterial cell also has cell wall. The size of the living organisms may be as small as a millionth of a meter, maybe as large as few centimeters. However, most of the cells are microscopic in size and are not visible to unaided eye. They need to be enlarged or magnified by a microscope. The smallest cell is 0.1 to 0.5 micrometer in bacteria. The largest cell is the egg of an ostrich, 170 millimeter to 130 millimeter. The size of the cell has no relation with the size of the body of animal or plant. It's not necessary that the elephant be much bigger than the nut of rat. The size of the cell is related. The cell is related to its function. For example, nerve cells both in elephant and rat are long and branched. They perform same function, that is of transferring of messages. You have learned that each living organism has many organs. You studied in class 7th about digestive organs together constitute the digestive system. Each organ in the system performs different functions such as digestion, assimilation, absorption. Similarly, different organs of a plant perform specific or specialized function. For example, roots help in absorption of water and minerals. Each organ is further made up of smaller parts called a tissue. Is a group of similar cells performing a specific function. What is a tissue? Tissue is a group of similar cells performing a specific function. We'll revise once again, students. Revise from first once again all the important things. First is discovery of cell. Robert Hooke in 1665 observed the slice of cork under a simple magnifying device. Cork is a part of a bark of a tree. He took thin slices of cork and observed them in microscope. He noticed partition boxes or compartments in the cork slice. These boxes appeared like a honeycomb. He also noticed that one box was separated from the other by a wall or partition. Hooke coined the term cell for each box. What Hooke observed as box or cells in the cork were actually dead cells. Cells of living organisms could be observed only after the discovery of improved microscope. Very little was known about the cell. For the next 150 years after Robert Hooke's observation, today we know a lot about cell structure, function because of improved microscopes having high magnification. Both bricks in a building and cells in living organisms are basic structural units. The buildings, though built of similar bricks, have different design, shapes and sizes. Similarly, in the living world, organisms differ from one another but are all made up of cells. Cells in the living organisms are complex living structures unlike non-living bricks. The egg of a hen represents a single cell and is big enough to be seen by the unaided eye. How do scientists observe and study the living cells? They use microscopes which magnify objects. Stains are used to color the parts of cells to study the detailed structure. There are millions of living organisms. They are of different shapes and sizes. Their organs also vary in shape, size and number of cells. Can you guess the number of cells in a tall tree or in a huge animal like elephant? The number runs into billions and trillions. Human body has trillions of cells which vary in shapes and sizes. Different groups of cells perform different variety of functions. Organisms made of more than one cell are called multicellular. Number of cells being less in small organisms does not in any way affect the functioning of an organism. You will be surprised to know that an organism with a billions of cells begins the life as a single cell, which is the fertilized egg. The fertilized egg multiplies the number of cells as development proceeds. The organism made up of a single cell organism called unicellular. A single cell organism performs all the necessary functions that a multicellular organisms perform. A single celled organism like amoeba captures digests food, respirates, excretes, grows, reproduces. Similar function in multicellular organisms are carried out by groups of specialized cells. How do you define the shape of an amoeba? Amoeba shape appears to be irregular. Amoeba has no definite shape unlike other organisms. It keeps on changing its shape. Observe the projection of varying lengths protruding out of its body. These are called pseudopodia, as you learnt in class 7. These projections appear and disappear as amoeba moves or feeds. A white blood cell in human blood is another example of single cell which can change its shape. But while WBC is a cell, amoeba is a full-fledged organism. What shape do you observe in organisms with millions of cells such as blood, muscle, nerve of human beings? The different shapes are related to their specific function. Generally, cells are round, spherical or elongated. Some cells are long and pointed at both ends. They exhibit a spindle shape. Cells sometimes are quite long. Some of them are branched like the nerve cell or a neuron. The nerve cell receives and transfers the messages. Can I guess which part of the cell gives its shape? Components of cell engrossed in a membrane. This cell membrane provides shape to the cells of plants and animals. Cell wall is an additional covering over the cell membrane in plants. Gives shape and rigidity to the cells. Bacterial cell also has a cell wall. The size of cell in living organisms may be as small as millionth of a micrometer, or may be large as few centimeters. For most of the cells are microscopic in size and are not visible to the unaided eye. They need to be enlarged, magnified by a microscope. The smallest cell is 0.1 to 0.5 micrometer in bacteria. The largest cell measuring 170 millimeter to 130. Egg of an ostrich. Does not mean if the organism is bigger. It does not mean if the organism is bigger. If the organism is bigger, the cells have to be bigger. The size of the cell is related to its function. For example, nerve cells in both elephant and rat are long and branched. They perform the same function. Today we learnt about the cell and information. Cell was discovered by cell na ಕಂಡುಹಿಡಿದಿದ್ದು ಯಾರು? ರಾಬರ್ಟ್ ಹುಕ್ ಅನ್ನೋನು ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಮೈಕ್ರೋಸ್ಕೋಪ್ ನ ಡೆವಲಪ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಅವನು ಕಂಡುಹಿಡಿದಿದ್ದು ಸೆಲ್ ನ. ಗೊತ್ತಾಯ್ತಾ? ಆಮೇಲೆ ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಅಂದರೆ ಸೆಲ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ. ಸೆಲ್ಲು ಡಿಫ್ರೆಂಟ್ ಶೇಪ್ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಡಿಫ್ರೆಂಟ್ ಶೇಪ್ ಇರೋದ್ರಿಂದ ಅದು ಡಿಫ್ರೆಂಟ್ ಫಂಕ್ಷನ್ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. ಫಾರ್ ಎಕ್ಸಾಂಪಲ್ಲು ನರ್ವ್ ಸೆಲ್ ಬೇರೆ ಥರ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಆಮೇಲೆ ವೈಟ್ ಬ್ಲಡ್ ಸೆಲ್ ಬೇರೆ ಥರ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ನಿಮ್ಮ ಅಮೀಬಾ ಸೆಲ್ಲು ಶೇಪ್ ಚೇಂಜ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡೆ ಮೂವ್ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. ಈ ಥರ ಡಿಫ್ರೆಂಟ್ ಶೇಪು, ಡಿಫ್ರೆಂಟ್ ಸೈಜ್ ಸೆಲ್ಗಳೆಲ್ಲ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಡಿಫ್ರೆಂಟ್ ಸೈಜು, ಡಿಫ್ರೆಂಟ್ ಶೇಪ್ ಸೆಲ್ಗಳೆಲ್ಲ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ನೋಡಿ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನರ್ವ್ ಸೆಲ್ ಉದ್ದ ಇರುತ್ತೆ, ಮಸಲ್ ಸೆಲ್ ಫ್ಲೆಕ್ಸಿಬಲ್ ಇರುತ್ತೆ, ರೆಡ್ ಬ್ಲಡ್ ಸೆಲ್ ರೌಂಡ್ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಅದರ ಡಿಫ್ರೆಂಟ್ ಶೇಪ್ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಅದು ಫಂಕ್ಷನ್ ಏನು ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅದರ ಪ್ರಕಾರ ಅದಿರುತ್ತೆ. ಯೂನಿಸೆಲ್ಲಾರ್ ಅಂದರೆ ಏನು? ಸಿಂಗಲ್ ಸೆಲ್ ಆರ್ಗನಿಸಮ್ಗೆ ಯೂನಿಸೆಲ್ಲಾರ್ ಆರ್ಗನಿಸಮ್ ಅಂತೀವಿ. ಮಲ್ಟಿಸೆಲ್ ಆರ್ಗನಿಸಮ್ ಅಂದರೆ ಮೋರ್ ದ್ಯಾನ್ ಒನ್ ಸೆಲ್ ಅಂತ. ಸೆಲ್ಲು ಒಳ್ಳೆ ಬ್ರಿಕ್ಸ್ ಥರ ಅರೇಂಜ್ ಆಗಿರುತ್ತೆ. ಸೆಲ್ಲು ಹೆಂಗೆ ಬಿಲ್ಡಿಂಗಲ್ಲಿ ಬ್ರಿಕ್ಸ್ ಅರೇಂಜ್ ಆಗಿರುತ್ತೋ ಆ ಥರ ಅರೇಂಜ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಸೆಲ್ನ ನಾವು ಬಿಲ್ಡಿಂಗ್ ಬ್ಲಾಕ್ ಆಫ್ ಲೈಫ್ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. ಏನಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ? ಸೆಲ್ನ ಬಿಲ್ಡಿಂಗ್ ಬ್ಲಾಕ್ ಆಫ್ ಲೈಫ್ ಅಂತ ಕೂಡ ನಾವು ಕರಿತೀವಿ. ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು. ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಮಾಡೋಣ. ಆ ಅಮೀಬಾ ಲೆಗ್ನ ಏನಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ? ಸೂಡೋಪೋಡಿಯಾ ಅಂತೀವಿ. ಅಮೀಬಾ ಲೆಗ್ನ ಏನಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ? ಸೂಡೋಪೋಡಿಯಾ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ. ಅಮೀಬಾ ಲೆಗ್ನ ಸೂಡೋಪೋಡಿಯಾ ಅಂತ ನಾವು ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ. ಅಮೀಬಾ ಲೆಗ್ನ ಸೂಡೋಪೋಡಿಯಾ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ ನಾವು. ಲೆಗ್ನ ಸೂಡೋಪೋಡಿಯಾ ಅಂತೀವಿ. ನೋಡಿ, ಮಸಲ್ ಕಾಂಟ್ರಾಕ್ಷನ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ರಿಲ್ಯಾಕ್ಸೇಷನ್ ಇದೆ. ಮಸಲ್ ಸೆಲ್ ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ತಕ್ಕನಂಗಿದೆ. ನರ್ವ್ ಸೆಲ್ ಇದೆ, ರೆಡ್ ಬ್ಲಡ್ ಸೆಲ್ ಇದೆ. ಬ್ಲಡ್ಡು, ಮಸಲು, ನರ್ವ್ ಆಫ್ ಹ್ಯೂಮನ್ ಬೀಯಿಂಗ್ಸ್. ದ ಶೇಪ್ಸ್ ಆರ್ ರಿಲೇಟೆಡ್ ಟು ದೇರ್ ಸ್ಪೆಸಿಫಿಕ್ ಫಂಕ್ಷನ್ಸ್. ಸೆಲ್ಸ್ ಆರ್ ರೌಂಡ್, ಸ್ಪೆರಿಕಲ್ ಆಗಿರ್ಬೋದು. ಇಟ್ ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಬಿ ಎಲಾಗೇಟೆಡು, ಲಾಂಗು, ಅಟ್ ಪಾಯಿಂಟೆಡ್ ಎಂಡು ಎಲ್ಲ ಇರ್ಬೋದು. ಸೊ ಇದನ್ನೆಲ್ಲ ಕ್ಲೀನಾಗಿ ಓದ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿ.